the structure mainly wood and canvas. Of course, we left the canvas off this so that you can appreciate the wing structure. Now, and again, the most important thing about this plane is Snoopy's airplane.
Okay.
To me, anyways. So over here, we have this metal airplane. This is the Ford Tri-Motor. Essentially, it's
he just rode in one.
You did. Good
I
for
did
you.
too. Where at?
Naples, Florida.
Okay, I did it at Oshkosh a couple weeks ago.
Ford Tri-Motor. This was designed in 1924 by a gentleman named William Stout. Stout was inspired to build a metal airplane. Follow me.
Yeah.
Stout was inspired to build a metal airplane. Just for reason, I'll tell you why.
Maybe we get to fly in this one too.
Alcoa Aluminum was making this product. This is aviation aluminum. So if you bend that in both directions, now bend it this way. Now bend it this way. Cross this way.
This way?
The other way.
Put your hands there. So that's okay. So you can bend that both ways. Now feel that. Is that lighter?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So bend that. Now bend it the other way.
Can't.
So
Can't
that's
bend it.
but that's lighter, but yet stronger than the sheet.
Really? That's so interesting. Ooh.
So it's because of this new product Alcoa Aluminum was coming out with called Duraloom. He was inspired to build a metal airplane. And this is 1924. This is just 6 years after our softwood camel. And so what he did was he didn't have the means to build the airplane, but he had the idea. So what he did was send out 106 letters to 106 possible investors. One of those people, the recipients of that letter, was a gentleman by the name of William May. He was the chief designer and engineer for Ford Motor Company. He took that letter, asking for an investment, to Henry and Edson. And they looked at it, this guy's got a good idea. He was already monopolized ground station. So they bought the company. Now they had a company to build aircraft. But they didn't have an industry to sell it to. People didn't want to ride this airplane because they were used to World War I biplanes. The pilots after the war were buying and barnstorming and do all these crazy things. So they had to overcome that vision of what an airplane was. They had to create a sense of security in the public to be able to ride on this airplane. So what they did was they hired people to fly in this airplane. They started out in Dearborn and they went on something they called the reliability tour. They started in Dearborn and fly around the Midwest, stopping occasionally in municipalities, and getting back to Dearborn and publishing the fact we went all this distance, we had all these people aboard, and we started off, we got back on time, everyone's safe. With that they created our aviation, commercial aviation industry. So the Ford Tri-Motor was also an airplane first used on a presidential tour. 1936, FDR used it for his campaign tour. It was also the first airplane to the Antarctic. And just 9 years ago, this airplane was being flown around Kalamazoo, and you could buy for $30, you could buy a ride on this thing. I remember flying over my house.
Really?
You hear a rattle and a bang, and look.
They paid more than that. Yeah, and it was there for several days in Naples. I don't know.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 80 miles an hour. Yeah, you can see it flying, it's defying gravity at about 80 miles an hour.
It takes off quick too.
Low. It's really low.
Well, yeah. Well, it's got
It's
got a lot of lift. It's got this massive wing, and it's very lightweight. So let's walk this way. Now we're going to get into military aircraft. This is the B-25 Billy Mitchell. And that's a wedding dress made out of a parachute. It interrupts my tour every time.
Really?
Yes. So the Billy Mitchell is a medium bomber. It was a 2-engine medium bomber. It was used primarily in the Pacific Theater War during World War II. It was used for bombing and strafing. You want to come up front, we've got 2 guns in the tail, and there's a gun on either side of the back of the wings. Those are called waist guns. And it has these guns up here on the sides of the front of the airplane. These are considered cheek guns. Cheek guns. And then we have guns in the nose. If you notice the Native American symbol on the rudders back there,
Yes.
that means it's part of, this airplane was part of the Air Apaches bomb group. The Air Apaches. And each bomb group had squadrons. Squadrons, maybe 10 airplanes. In this case, the Fighting Falcons. So this is a depiction of a Falcon. You would have had 10 aircraft painted the way that the Fighting Falcons. Let's go over here. You want to come over and step over the rope? We're going to duck under, we're going to watch our heads, we're going to duck underneath here into the bomb bay.
Oh, cool. Oh my gosh.
Watch your head.
Oh, I love watching.
Come on, sit back.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
So this is inside. We're standing in the bomb bay. And in the day, we would have had bomb racks here and here, and they would have been either 100 or 250 pound bombs that would drop out of here. This airplane had a 2,500 pound bomb load capacity. All the way in back, that's the co-pilot's chair sitting there. All the way in back, there's 2 guns. There would have been a tail gunner there. Then right here, mid-gun, midship, we would have had a gentleman here operating the waist guns, using whichever gun the threat would have been coming at from either side. Then up here is the ball turret, top turret, and there would have a gentleman standing here in this metal place. That would have been the navigator. He would also been operating the top turret. And then in the front, the pilot would actuate the 8 guns on the front of the airplane.
Wow, looks bigger from the inside than it does the outside.
Wow.
Okay, so if we want to duck back out,
What's that big tank shell here for?
well, I'll get into that in a minute.
Okay.
That's a 75 millimeter shell.
Yeah.
So, you ladies notice this shell right there?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Oh, wow, that's big.
Okay.
Oh, but everything
Go ahead,
there,
yeah.
too.
This thing had a lot of armament.
Yes, it did. And most of these extra guns were a result of adaptation in the field. They'd be out in the Pacific Islands, the mechanic, crew chief would say, well, let's put a couple extra guns here or there, or whatever. And they put that's how these cheat guns came on. That development was taken back to the factory. They created a new model called the J model. They put the guns on it. Now that's how they advanced that.
So they have place to put all that ammo.
Yes, yes, there's a lot of ammo. So I mentioned this is a J model. When we found this airplane, the nose piece was actually crushed in. And when we bought the airplane, when we went about, it was an H model. When we went about refurbishing and putting a new nose on it, we couldn't find the nose piece for an H model. So we put a J model nose piece on it and added the extra guns. So now it was billed as H model, but it's depicted here as a J model with the extra guns. What was an H model? Well, an H model would have been missing those bottom 4 guns. And in place, you saw that big shell, 75 millimeter shell, there would have been a cannon sticking out the front of this.
Wow.
And it would have shot that gun.
Oh.
And so this would go around to islands. This was a strafer. So it would do as much strafing as it would bombing. Fly low over islands, attacking Japanese positions in the Pacific Theater. And he would strafe ground troops and trucks and so on, marshalling yards. And with that cannon, he could actually sink small ships. So with all these guns, they could rotate the top turret so it points forward. You have your cheek guns, your top turret guns, and your 8 front guns, you'd have 14 guns forward firing, pulling one trigger, you could fire all those 14 guns at one target. So it was a really destructive airplane. It could be. The Billy Mitchell was also used on the Doolittle when we flew 14 off this So let's step up.
And this one was authentically used in World War II then?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, the backstory to this, actually we picked this up in Florida when we bought it. It had been used that day. It had been a corporate airline, if you can imagine. It would have been very noisy. It was also used for hauling tropical fish from South America, looking back to its history. And when we found it, it had been confiscated by the Miami-Dade County Sheriff officers because it was running drugs.
Oh man.
So we got it and had it go straight. Had it go straight.
It went straight.
Yeah.
What a history.
Scared straight.
This is the Air-Zoo's movie star. This is called the Combustion. The Combustion Spanish word roughly means, my understanding, pigeon. Why pigeon? Because they look at the side of this and they thought it had like the breast of a pigeon underneath it. 1939, Spain was at war with itself. It had a civil war. It was the communists versus the fascists. Nazi Germany was fascist. And they were selling the fascist Spaniards their best fighter, the German Me-109. So this airplane is a German Me-109, one of the most famous German airplanes in World War II. And when we found it, when we bought it, it had been used in 1969 for making the film Battle of Britain. The Battle of Britain was the British Spitfires versus the German Me-109. So this was, they'd taken the Spanish airplane and they painted it back up like a German airplane to look like this. This is what it looked like when we got it.
Wow.
Yep. And after the movie was filmed, we bought it. That airplane, brought it back here, refurbished it, and put it back in its Spanish colors again. This is a German V-1 flying bomb, the first cruise missile essentially. There's no controls over this. The Germans created about 10,000 of these. There's no pilot. It was a light it and forget it type of missile. Had a 1,000-pound payload, bomb payload in front. Had a rudimentary jet engine in back. And they would set up along the coast of France, pointed towards London, and they were trying to terrorize the British into surrender. Their target was London, on the other side of the island. And so they would calculate how many kilometers it was from their launching points, and they were launching these off of rails, pointed in that direction. And they would launch them with a jet engine, and they would take off and try to go to London. They would calculate the number of kilometers it was from their launch point to London, put that number in this little counter in this nose piece. When this went around, it counted the number of kilometers it had flown. When it reached the number that had been input in there, it shut the fuel off to the engine, so it just fell out of the air. So the idea was just to get it over there and let it fall. Londoners at the time would say, if you can hear it, you're safe. If you don't hear it, you're probably in peril, because it's coming down. There's a county in Kent, it's a county in London, England, by the name of Kent. And it has the misfortune of being on the English Channel, right in the line of fire to London, where these were flying, right in the flight path. This is a map of the county Kent in the summer of 1944. And each of those little dots you see there is a landing spot of one of these V-1 flying bombs.
They didn't know where they were going.
No, they didn't. So it was very unfortunate to live in the county Kent in that summer. Also, yes. So our invasion in the summer of '44, D-Day, disrupted this whole thing. They moved north into Norway, and we're shooting them from Norway. This is a P-47 Thunderbolt. B in bomber, P in pursuit. So this was a fighter plane. It had 4 50 caliber guns in each wing. Very powerful 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine. 2 banks of 9-cylinders. So there was a bank of 9 and another bank of 9 behind it. The cockpit was armored with metal, and the fuel tanks and wings were lined with rubber, so they were self-sealing. If you get hit by a shell, it would seal back up and wouldn't leak and catch on fire. So the pilots loved this plane because it was fast, it was very heavily armed, and if they took off at night, they were relatively sure they're going to get back at night. This was the most produced U.S. fighter and the most successful U.S. fighter in the European theater war. Its first mission was to follow our bomber, escort our bombers from England through France into Germany and back to protect them from Me-109s. And the further the bombers got into Europe, they couldn't, the planes would range, they didn't have the range to follow them into Germany any further. They have to turn around, and the bombers have to continue unescorted the rest of the way into Germany. So the P-47 was replaced by another airplane called the P-51 Mustang, which had a lot of range. The P-47 was relegated to ground attack, and that's where it excelled. It could carry more bomb load than the Billy Mitchell. That's how powerful it was. And it could also carry, if you see a rocket over there, it could carry 5 rockets on each wing. They had these 50 cal, so we could really tear off the ground target quite a bit.
Is that pushing the ground?
Yes. 5 rockets on each wing, 50 cal. This airplane is painted up after the airplane that Gabby Gabrowski flew in Europe. Gabby Gabrowski was the leading P-47 ace. What's an ace? It's a pilot that shoots down 5 enemy aircraft. That's a benchmark. I've shot down 5, I'm now an ace. You can become a double ace or triple ace. The leading ace in the European theater was a guy named Gabby Gabrowski. Again, he had 28 enemy kills.
Wow.
And he came back, he's been here to the Air Zoo. This is painted up like his plane. He's been back to the Air Zoo and he's sat in this plane. I've seen pictures of him in this plane.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is. Now if we go this way, I'd like to take you into our World War II exhibit. There's the rocket that was carried. This is our Guadalcanal Museum. Where'd the guys go? They're out there? Here we go.
They'll be slow.
Yeah. This is our Guadalcanal Museum through here. Why Guadalcanal is important? Well, the originator of this museum, Pete Parrish, was fought on Guadalcanal. Pete Sue Parrish, one of the ones that started the museum. That's her person airplane that hangs in the lobby. She was a WASP, Women's Air Service pilot. What they did was, during the war, they buried planes for manufacturing in the theater of battle. That's what she did. That's what a lot of women, 1,100 do that, exactly gets good. And anyways, that was her favorite airplane. She bought it, she flew it after the war, right up to the day her husband said, "You're done flying." But why is Guadalcanal important? Let's look at this map. United States, Japan, Pearl Harbor, Australia, Guadalcanal. We got word that the Japanese were building a landing strip on Guadalcanal. This is after Pearl Harbor. And we didn't want that because with a landing strip there at Guadalcanal, they could park their planes there, bring their ships down and attack Australia and cover their ships, protect their ships on this move. So we decided, red line in the sand, you're not going to go any farther. We hadn't met Japanese face to face yet. So that's what we invaded Guadalcanal. We took it over. It was a long, bloody battle. Thousands of Americans died. Thousands, even more, thousands of Japanese died. We took over the island. We took that land-based strip, and we started building it up for our own purposes. Like I said, it was a 6-month long bloody battle. And this is kind of a tribute to that battle. This piece of metal here is a piece of the wreckage from the U.S. destroyer Juno. What's important about Juno? Here's a picture of it. It was based in Guadalcanal. There were 4 brothers in New York, Irish brothers, the old Sullivan brothers. They all wanted to join the Navy. So they wanted to do it as a unit. So they all joined the Navy, and they told the Navy recruiters, we want to serve on the same ship. So they allowed them to do that. So they're serving on the Juno. During one of the battles, naval battles around Guadalcanal, the Juno was sunk. All 4 boys died. So they had to go back to the mother and say, your entire family's dead. So the Navy never allowed that again. That's never going to happen again. That's a piece of the Juno. There's a movie out depicting that, telling that whole story. I don't know if I think it's called the O'Sullivan Brothers. So if we go this way, I'll wait till your friends join us. This is the Drummond Wildcat, fighter plane, Navy fighter plane. This is the plane we had on our aircraft carriers at the beginning of the war. It was a good plane. It was a fast plane. It was even faster in a dive. It was very heavy. It had armored cockpit and self-sealing fuel tanks like the P-47, but it wasn't quite good enough. It wasn't quite fast enough. It couldn't keep up with the Japanese best airplane, which is called the Zero. Specifically, they were instructed, if you're going to battle Zero, do it in a dive, because that's where you can get your most speed. But don't dogfight with Zero. Attack them and leave. So we knew we had to have another plane better than this one. So when the war started, we immediately started building another plane. This was a good plane. At the end of the war, this had a 6-to-1 victory to kill ratio. Not too bad. But that wasn't going to win the war for us. So Drummond started building another airplane. You all know what this is?
Airspeed.
This is the Pitot Tube, so you know about it. So for your ladies, there's a tube. It goes all the way up into the cockpit to a dial in there called the Airspeed Indicator. And that's all full of air and it's closed at that end. There's no escape for the air. But when you flew with this airplane, in an airplane, the air tries to get in there. The faster you fly, the harder the air tries to get in there and builds up the pressure even higher. As the pressure builds up, that needle which pushes up in the airspeed indicator tells you how fast you're going. At night, when it was time to park your plane, you had to put one of these on there because wasps love to build their little mud nest in there. And you have to not have that filled up with mud. So.
I got one of these too.
Do you?
Radio.
Well, do you have one of these?
I don't know. What is that?
This is a Hellcat. This is a Drummond Hellcat.
No, mine's an F4F. Which one is this? I think mine's a Wildcat. Yeah.
This is F6F.
Yeah, I got the 4.
So this is, when Drummond when we were flying that, they started working on this, a replacement. You notice it's a considerably bigger airplane. It's got a massive 2,000 horsepower engine, the same Pratt & Whitney engine our P-47 had. It's a great big propeller on it. And it has 3 guns in each wing. And the pilots love this plane. Again, self-sealing fuel tanks, armored cockpit. The Japanese did not take any precautions for their pilots. In fact, the U.S. pilots called the Japanese airplanes Ronsons. Ronson is a brand of a cigarette lighter.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you hit them and they catch fire. So, but the pilots love this an awful lot. It came into service in 1943, just in time for the invasion of the Mariana Islands, which are north of the Solomon Islands. And then it took place in a battle, the air battle for the Mariana Islands. In that battle, there were over 400 Japanese planes that came to attack us. We sent out 100 Hellcats. Those 100 Hellcats shot down 400 Japanese fighters. We lost 30 Hellcats.
Wow.
During that battle, one of the pilots, boy from Tennessee, they're all chatting on the radio, yelling and screaming. He yells out, "Well, this ain't nothing but a dang old turkey shoot." That battle became known as the Mariana's Turkey Shoot.
Oh, jeez.
So notice the length of the landing gear here, and I'm going to refer to this a little bit later. So at the end of the war, this had a,
That was the problem with that. The landing gear was screwy.
yeah.
Especially in a carrier too, where you got waves and everything.
Yeah, so at the end of the war, this airplane had a 19-to-1 victory to kill ratio. So this is a real world beater.
Yeah.
Pilots call it the ace maker. A lot of people say this is the reason we won the Pacific Battle, Pacific War.
Now, was one of these aircraft recovered from Lake Michigan?
I'll talk about that in a
Okay.
minute.
Now you've got experience.
Yeah. I'm the next tour guide. No, I'm just kidding.
You just beat him the lines.
Yeah.
So we have here what a lot of people consider the prettiest World War II aircraft. That's called the Corsair, the Vought Corsair. It was a Navy fighter and it was also a Marine fighter. These flew off aircraft carriers. When they first started flying these off aircraft carriers, they had a little problem because they had a tendency to bounce. And by bouncing, their tail dragging would not catch the strip, would not catch the wire. And so they'd have to go around and come back and catch it. So I'm going to take you in here and show you something. Why don't you just step right in here. You can see here we have 350 caliber guns, and you can see the belts of bullets that go out into the wings. Now each one of those belts would go out there 3 yards. So we had 3, 6, 9 yards of belts of bullets. So typically these would go out, do their battle, come back. The crew chief, who was the mechanic for this airplane, it was as much his airplane as it was the pilot's. He would come out and say, "Did you hurt my airplane?" He'd also say, "How much ammunition do you need? How much you need?" And his typical response would be, "Give me the whole 9 yards."
Oh, that's what that is.
Give me the whole 9 yards. So they would, whole 9 yards.
So how fast did these guns shoot that ammunition?
Well, these are all 50 cals, just like on the Billy Mitchell, and they somewhat vary, but generally 500, 500 bullets a minute. 1,500 bullets a minute out of this wing, 1,500 out of that. So you would just go, just little spurts, because you didn't want to run out of ammunition in dogfighting. I'd like to have you come over and just push right there. Just take your middle finger and push in there right there.
It's cloth, huh?
That's fabric.
Fabric, yeah.
You know, it feels right.
The whole thing.
Not the whole thing, specific areas. If you look across here, ladies, you can look across here, and if any of you are familiar with sewing and pinking scissors, you can see the pinking on the fabric.
Yeah.
Well, how about that?
Yes. So, out of fabric, if you got a bullet hole, the crew chief come out, look at the bullet hole, cut a piece of his t-shirt off and patch the hole. It also saved weight, and during World War II, we were having a little issue keeping enough aluminum going to our factories. So this is a way to reduce the amount of aluminum that went into each plane. So let's step back out here.
Interesting.
And the reason for the inverted gull wing design was for why?
I'll get into that.
Okay.
You just hang on, we'll get to it.
Sorry, I had of things.
He's itching.
Yeah. I'm only here for 3 hours, so I want to learn as much as possible.
Okay, you'll get it all. And it won't take 3 hours. This little device here on this wing, it's not on the other wing. So why is that on here? Well, understanding airplanes, when airplanes get slow enough, it starts to not want to fly anymore when it gets slow enough. And it goes into a dive. And that's called a stall. It's stalled. In most airplanes, because it has a heavy nose, the engine, it'll just go over like this. This airplane had a tendency to go to the left and down. So now the pilot was dealing with two aspects of the stall. So what they did, they determined that the right wing was a little bit faster than the left wing, aerodynamically. So they put this little piece of metal here to disrupt the airflow over the wing, which slowed this wing down and made it at the same speed as the other wing. Then it would just stall evenly. If we see these holes here in the wing, you see these are air inlets. You have a fresh air inlet for the engine intake, and then you have a round device here, that's an oil cooler. So they pump oil from the engine into the oil cooler to get cooled, and it would go back into the engine. Because of that, during a dive, this plane would whistle and shriek. And the Japanese come to refer to this airplane as whistling death. and again, this airplane, this Corsair, has the Pratt & Whitney 2800 2,000 horsepower engine. Same engine as the P-50, P-47, and the Hellcat. And when they were designing this airplane, they wanted to convert as much as that 2,000 horsepower to airspeed as possible. So they put on the largest propeller that they could, a 13-foot propeller, and on the drawing board when they did that, they didn't have enough ground clearance. So somehow they had to get the nose of the airplane in the air, and they could do it by two different means. They either lengthen the landing gear, or at the point the landing gear touched the wings, they could bend the wings up, pushing the fuselage up in the air. And that's what they chose to do. By comparison, the Hellcat is essentially the same airplane, same engine, same propeller, same mission, about the same aircraft, but the landing gear on that airplane is 14 inches longer. And so this airplane at the end of the war, the Corsair, excuse me, had a 16-to-1 victory kill ratio. It was very successful. One of the reasons it wasn't as high as the Hellcat is because it spent a lot of its time supporting our ground troops, the Marines, by dropping bombs and shooting at ground targets. The Hellcat was more of a Navy battleship, or Navy ship. It was out looking for other fighters. If you turn around and look at the airplane behind you,